Hey everybody, welcome back. I hope you're having a great day. I have to say that this video is something I've been kind of working on for a period of time. I've been kind of gathering information from a number of different people, just to get a sense of, well, if you saw the title, obviously, what men want versus what women want, and mainly when we're talking about relationships, it really kind of comes down to, well, my opening point, it really kind of comes down to what type of person you're dealing with, what type of man versus what type of woman you're dealing with, the level of deception they're willing to live in, and whether or not they have any real sense of self-reflection determines a lot about how they're going to approach a defining list of what they are after. And this applies, obviously, as I said, to both men and women. I mean, it really is determined by your character and what drives you in life. And I say that because I've met many different men that I would say are fairly red pill, but there's kind of a wide, a very broad spectrum when it comes to this sort of thing. And I would say that you've got one end of the spectrum where they are absolutely anti, that they're super black pill, and they're kind of filled with that red pill rage where everything women do is completely evil, completely irredeemable, and there's zero chance of ever finding a good woman, present day or even past. And while there is some truth to that when it comes to the way our modern day culture and society has kind of turned women into literally the worst version of themselves. It brings out the worst parts of their nature and encourages promiscuity, hedonism, cheating, lying, and all these things that just destroy our society, destroy relationships, marriages, families. While it encourages all of that, I don't believe that it's quite all the way that end of the spectrum. Now, many of you that watch my videos, you already know my stance on marriage and that the government gets involved in that relationship, in that contract, and then incentivizes the woman to break it and go uh, basically lie, cheat, commit fraud, and get as much money as she possibly can. And they really don't ever uh, penalize or punish the other side. And I personally experienced this during a divorce quite a few years back. But when talking about the red pill, you go from one end of the spectrum back to the other end where they may still occasionally date women and be involved with women, and they don't quite have that red pill rage. They kind of enjoy it kind of on the side. At the same time, a lot of them will jump in and they'll condemn women that have been involved in the corn industry or only fools or anything like that. They'll condemn that, but then they'll watch it themselves, which has always been kind of hypocritical to me, because I believe men should have self control when it comes to that sort of thing. You should have a measure of self control. I think if you want to get ultimate red pill, having a measure of self control over yourself, especially in that way, especially when it comes to sex, is absolutely important. I know there are guys that are going to disagree with me that with that, and they're going to act like, look, I can't really have any self control. I can't really do that. And what you're saying just isn't right. But I fully believe that a measure of self control in that area is absolutely essential if you're ever going to have any real red pill or even just honest to goodness self reflection for yourself when it comes to self control. So, so you got those two gamuts of that, and then there's even other red pill type of guys that would be in a relationship if it's healthy, if it has some measure of it has to have stability, faithfulness, and all these other things that they embrace, and they don't embrace sort of the double standard of hedonism out there, where they're saying, well, basically there's hookup culture, so I can go around and mess with hookup culture all I want because they're already doing it and they're not going to change, so I might as well just join in the fray, which really, in my opinion, is hypocritical and just adds to the problem. How can they possibly be running around hooking up if men start pulling away and stop hooking up? I have been reading articles and seeing indications that that might actually be happening. Men might actually be stopping and saying, "Look, we're feeding into a problem that we don't need to be a part of. We don't need to do that. We need peace, and we need to stop feeding the monster." So when it comes to men, and I'm going to start with the guys first. When it comes to the men, and let's talk about it from a healthy viewpoint. And then we'll address maybe one or two of the unhealthy viewpoints. But when it comes to men, one of the major things that a man looks for when they're looking for a woman and they're coming from a healthy viewpoint and potentially a long-term relationship and even short-term, fidelity. Fidelity is a huge, huge deal. And for myself and a lot of the other men that I've encountered, not just here on the channel, ones I know in real life that are just, they're pretty stand up guys. They're very honest, straightforward. They have good boundaries and they don't like to simp in any way, shape, or form. Fidelity is such a major thing because we don't need a relationship to be able to pay our bills, take care of our lives, function, do anything. The main point of the relationship is to have somebody that we can connect with, have some emotional investment to some degree in. And if you don't have any fidelity as a woman coming into that situation, let's say you've been out involved in the hookup culture and you've just been hooking up and you got some huge high body count and you come in and you don't know what faithfulness is because sex is basically a meaningless act to you that you just recreationally do with everybody, and you don't, by default you wouldn't really know what faithfulness is. You've conditioned yourself to think and wired your brain to think in a way to where your default status is somebody who just sleeps around. Then fidelity is such a foreign concept to you that you might be able to fake it for a period of time, but it's going to matter to any man that you have the fidelity that you're you're not going to upend their entire life. That's why it's like a primary characteristic that we look for. And I think a lot of women just fail to understand that the reason why that's so majorly important is if you don't have that, you don't have trust, you don't have depth to the relationship. You've got constant issues where you're doubting and looking out for deception, and you're basically not even enjoying the relationship. And I realize relationships aren't all just about enjoyment, but it has to be something that's generally a good thing on most days and brings peace to your life. It has to be that. If it is not those things, and we're not just talking about working on a relationship, we're talking about something that's just a giant mess that's better off that you not even have it in your life. And that is what men are trying to assess when we look at that sort of thing. Very logical, very reasonable about it. When we look at a relationship, we're trying to determine, is this going to cause more trouble than good? Is this person expecting me to be their entertainment director or coordinator that is basically setting them up for a roller coaster every day of their life? But at some point, the roller coaster isn't going to be exciting enough and you're going to jump ship. That's not real commitment. That's using people. And men, generally speaking, at least the ones that I've encountered, we're all looking for people. If we are even looking for people, many of you have already stated in comments in some of my other videos that you're not really interested in this sort of thing. But as far as relationship, and certainly not traditional marriage, which I totally understand, um, but we're looking for somebody who brings peace and stability that is added to our own. You don't create it for us in the beginning. Just to clarify that. A relationship never brings that to anybody. You have to already have that going on in your life, and you have to decide to make sure that the relationship that you bring in adds to that and doesn't take away from it and is not a detriment to your life. Now, we're not when I say not a detriment to your life too, just to give a little bit of clarification on that, people that are genuinely devoted, faithful, committed, and loving towards each other, and they have real, serious adult conversation where we can cut the crap and get right down to how you really feel about something, and you're not dancing around and acting like a 18-year-old who's getting the ick about every other thing, but you're actually able to have an adult, honest conversation. People like that can do that, can stand by each other through storms. They can stand by each other through all the problems and issues that are going to go on out there that life's going to throw at you. They can stand by each other through all of that. And when you can do that and you can have those serious conversations, that eliminates a lot of the problem. That we need honest, straightforward conversation. And that would actually be another major point that men are looking for. And I guess one other one that I would say is fairly important is women that understand what it's like to be feminine. Um, in the past, on quite a few different occasions, I've met women that where I used to teach self defense, actually for quite a few years, and I would meet women that somehow had been misled by somebody that had instructed them that they could take on a guy that was twice their size and kick his ass. Utter insanity. I mean, just things that would never work in real life. Any of you who've ever been in any form of competition, especially when it comes to martial arts, MMA, or anything like that, or understand anything about boxing, there's weight classes, even in the men's and women's competition in those areas where it's very, very clear that if I've got a 20, 30, 40 pound advantage over you and I hit you and you hit me, you're going down and you're going to be in trouble. It's not an even exchange. It does not work that way. Men easily overpower women when it comes to that. And it is just moronic and not reasonable or logical to even think that way. And I've encountered women that were like that, that tried so hard to get back to my point, that tried so hard to not be feminine. They wanted it to seem almost like they were masculine. I want to learn how to fight like a guy, and I want to go do this, and I want to go build this, and I want to do that. And they're pushing all of this, and they come and they bring it to you like it's a bragging right, or they want to tell you something about what their income is like. And I'm just sitting there thinking, I don't care about those things. They don't matter to me. What does matter to me is, are you insufferable? Do you bring peace? Do you bring modesty, honesty, commitment, and fidelity? Characteristics and traits that show me who you are and who your character is, and whether or not we're going to mesh together during the times that we need to lean on each other. I don't need your income, and I'm not really concerned about whether or not you think you can squat a certain amount. That just doesn't matter to me as a guy. And I would say a major unhealthy trait that I see constantly come across the board is men basically bragging about how they are attracted to promiscuity and will sleep with it, but then turn around and act like they're denouncing it. Absolutely ridiculous. I feel like us men need to always have a degree of self-control when it comes to that. And I've emphasized that earlier in the video, and I just want to kind of retouch on that point. Self-control is just a major thing that I feel like if you're going to preach it, you have to live it. So when we get down to the women's ones, I know I'm about 12 minutes in now, but I think for a healthy relationship, and as always in the comments, everybody feel free to dive in, throw some things onto the list that you think I might have missed, and give me some feedback on it because I'm curious what you all think. And I love having discussion about it. I love reading the comments. I mean, some of them are just very insightful. Some of them are freaking hilarious. I love it. So feel free to jump in the comments and let me know what you think. But for the women, I would say women tend to be attracted to quiet strength. And this is from a healthy perspective. Healthy perspective. Let's clarify that. When I say quiet strength, I mean it's often described by some of the sigma characteristics that are out there, not necessarily an alpha. Alphas tend to be a bit louder, noisier, and braggadocious, whereas somebody who's more sigma has a lot more confidence in and of themselves. They're a lot more determined. I realize some of you may like, Steve, I don't think I like those terms. I don't agree. Maybe they've shifted. Maybe they've changed. I'm just going off my own version of what I think that means because I've seen varying definitions all over the place. Anytime I've researched it, nobody completely agrees on anything, of course. This is the real world after all. But if you have a quiet confidence and a determination in your life to where you don't reek of desperation when you meet women, I think that that is a major, major attractor for them. I've gotten that idea basically by being told that by many different women over the years. That's one of the major things that draws them to certain types of men. They feel like you have a quiet confidence, but at the same time, you're not per se off-putting. You can you can address them directly, be to the point, maybe even be slightly flirtatious, but at the same time, you're not ever overreaching. You're just relaxed and completely at peace within yourself. And a woman can look at that and think, oh my gosh, that's very, very attractive. I'm drawn to that. And one of the reasons why is it shows them that you spent enough time alone, you've spent enough time in solitude, and you spent enough time working on yourself to where you're not particularly worried what she or anybody else thinks. they're not going to shape your vision of who you are. And from my understanding, that's a major attractor when it comes to women. And I'm not suggesting that guys that do that end up ever getting rude or crass about it, but they, maintaining that and being able to keep your cool is a major thing that I've heard over and over again as a major attractor for women. Another thing is a sense of purpose when they see that you're driven in areas of your life where you're determined to move forward, better yourself, better your finances, better your life. You tackle problems, you don't complain about it. You have that sense of purpose. That is a major attractor. Now, I've kind of been dodging the whole physical end of it. Obviously, physical attraction is a major component for both men and women, but I'm really kind of focusing on the characteristics that are more like the long-lasting ones and ones that would make a healthy relationship, and then ones that are a little bit more damaging, kind of leaving at the bottom of the list to talk about. And to get to the last one, this would be the one where unfortunately women have been conditioned, I think, a lot by social media and other stuff, and even with their own we all have our own shortcomings when it comes to our character and our gender as to what we can be drawn into, that's particularly toxic or bad for us. And we're going to talk about the bad boy syndrome. You see, the bad boy syndrome in many ways has a lot of similarities. If you take a look at a strong male, that a strong man that is successful, driven, determined, and then you look at somebody who's and a strong male that doesn't care about things that he's not supposed to, and then you look at a bad boy who maybe isn't as driven in those areas. Maybe he's even a bit of a deadbeat and he just looks kind of, rough, and he's got tattoos and he looks like he kind of doesn't care about anything but himself, and he's kind of, kind of disconnected from everything. Women tend to be drawn to that because it's almost like a bait and switch, in my opinion. Now, feel free to disagree, of course, but they're drawn to that because it's kind of a bait and switch, that it almost resembles certain good male characteristics, but it's almost like a darker version that they think is going to be great. But of course, any woman that's ever ended up in a relationship with a bad boy, how badly did your life get ruined by that? There's a big difference between that and a man who is calmly confident, speaks only when he needs to, is self-assured, and is driven by purpose, versus a bad boy. Both of those things are attractive, one probably more so than the other, depending on the type of personality. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is determined by the type of personality you come into this with. There will be women that unfortunately have been so damaged by hookup culture and the toxicity and the promiscuity that's being promoted out there, that they will almost always be primarily drawn to bad boys, bad situations, and things that are just going to destroy their lives. And it's almost like they're never going to be able to stop because the self-reflection that's needed to be able to put an end to all of that just is not there. So there is that aspect. And of course, as I mentioned before, men who have no measure of self-control when it comes to their own sex drive and end up hooking up with women that are promiscuous. So they end up becoming that bad boy in a way. So both of those things are basically downward spirals and a race to the bottom. And you have to learn how to control and mitigate that. You've got to learn how to deal with that. And us as men and women need to be able to learn how to deal with that. So I'm just trying to keep it real and address it from as many points of view as possible. So we're close enough to the truth by coming down the middle as we possibly can be, without being so completely lopsided that you're like, well, this particular group is completely unsalvageable. Because generalities, although they are generally true, are just generalities. There may be exceptions, and exceptions are rare, but there are exceptions. We have to acknowledge, at least on some level, if we're going to be honest, that generalities are generally true and there are some exceptions. Whether or not you're an exception is determined entirely by your actions, not your declarations. You can say whatever you want, but we're defined by what we do. So I think on that point, I'll end it here for today. And if you like what you heard, of course, drop a like. It helps the algorithm. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. And as I said before, and as always, I want to hear from you guys in the comments, see what you think. other things that you would love to see added to that list that I gave today, and some of your insights on that. Good, bad experiences, what have you. So I'm going to leave it there, and I look forward to talking to you all again soon. Have an amazing day.